había. Son millares. Entonces, cuando te vayas, esta que está a 6:30, la deja y la hecho contra el buzón. Pues mira, para que no se queden ahí fuera, me la paso por aquí, ¿vale?
They say technology makes our lives easier. For work, to learn, to travel, to communicate. But there are things that machines cannot yet do. Things as important as engaging, putting themselves in your shoes, having intuition, or making intelligent decisions. In an increasingly technological world, we need professionals who provide intelligent solutions based on their know-how. Because there are things that technology cannot yet do for you. The human tech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on the 2nd of June, 2026. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is about planning. Planning our future is always an asset and value, and information here is key. How you would like to distribute assets, risks, and wishes. Okay, we've got the privilege here to have. Can you hear me now, Michael, Raphael? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
I can hear you perfect. Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. Oh, somebody's saying that I've got an echo here, but you can listen properly. Yeah, Michael. Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Williams, if you have a problem, log out and logging back in, because probably might be you. All right, well, I'm going to introduce you here the experts. We're going to have in the panel very good, knowledgeable lawyer Michael Davis from Almeria. Hello, Michael. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Then from the Mapfre head office, we have senior Raphael, financial advisor. Hello, Raphael.
Hello, everyone.
And then we have Pedro that he's having some problems connecting, but he's going to join us now to talk about inheritance as well. Now, I'm going to share, if you will please send us a message now. Where are you contacting us from? And then we're going to start with the introductions and everything. Michael, I would like you are an expert. You're more than 25 years in law here, practicing law. You've seen so many cases. We could be forever talking about situations. I'm going to share with you, well, the topics, obviously. We're going to just run through it. If you could spend an average of 15 minutes talking, Rafael would take over. Pedro, and we'll start with questions and answer that I'm happy to take from the ground. For those who don't know, Michael Davis is a lawyer, a Spanish solicitor, abogado, practicing law more than 25 years. And one of the expertise is inheritance. So I thought he would be key here to give us insight and knowledge about everything. Okay, Michael, over to you.
Okay, Ignacio. Oh, hi, Pedro. Nice to see you. Pedro just joined.
Okay.
Hello, Michael. Hello.
Hi,
Good to see you. Hello.
Okay, so my name is Michael Davis. I'm a Spanish lawyer. We have offices down in Almeria and Marbella. And my expertise is inheritance. And I've been handling basically wills, estate planning, probate, inheritance-related litigation, mainly for expats all over Spain, including the islands, since 1994. So I'm afraid to say, Ignacio, I'm even older than you think. So it's actually over 30 years now. So
Oh,
okay. Yeah. I the website still says 25 years. The last years have just gone by. I haven't even realized. Okay, so I mean, if there's one, I know I've only got 15 minutes. I'll just quickly go through things. So if there's one thing that I always recommend people that buy their properties in Spain, There's one thing that they, from the point of view of somebody that handles inheritance, that's my point of view, is definitely when the conveyancer, the lawyer handling your purchase, offers to make a will for you, definitely get a will done. It's very, very important. If you hire an expert, somebody like us that's used to do lots of inheritance, even better. But the most important thing is to get your Spanish will done. Spanish inheritance laws are very different to those in your home country, especially if you're from the UK, Australia, Canada, where basically you've got liberty to do whatever you want with your inheritance. You can leave it all to your spouse. That's what you normally do. And second step down to the children. Spanish people can't do that. Spanish people are limited with what they can do. Basically, if they have children, they can't leave everything to their spouse. They have to leave 2/3 down to the kids. Now, if you come from one of these countries where there is liberty to do whatever you want, we've got a great instrument in Spain, which is called Directive 650/2012, that allows people from those countries to make a Spanish will and choose their national law to determine how they're allowed to distribute their estate. So with that, you're going to escape this Spanish system of obligatory heirs that can cause you lots of problems. Because remember, if just imagine you move over to Spain and you may have you have children from other marriage, your wife has children from other marriages, or even if you don't, but what you want to do is basically leave everything to each other in the first step very often, and Spanish people can't do that. But you can do that, but you must make a will. If you become a resident in Spain and you've got children and you die without a will, what were the biggest surprise to people, apart from the going, the probate process and the intestate process, is much more expensive than if you have a Spanish will. What surprises people is that in Spain, it's the kids that will get the lion's share and not the spouse. So it's very important to get the will done. So we'll quickly jump into the situation of inheritance tax in Spain. Most regions in Spain now offer a very generous deal for spouse, children, grandchildren, and parents. So in places like Andalusia, the first €1 million is exempt for group 1 and 2. So that's children, parents, and spouse. And the rest you get a 99% discount. So you basically pay almost no inheritance tax. Up in the Valencia region, it's almost the same. They don't have the €1 million exemption, but you get a 99% discount, and the first €100,000 exempt between group 1 and 2 beneficiaries. So there's no inheritance tax worth talking about either. Similar situation now in the Balearics. It's strange because remember we used to, in the old days, we used to do lots of consultations. Where should you buy in Spain if you're thinking about inheritance tax? And there was a big difference between some of the most popular destinations. But now the big destinations, Andalusia, Valencia region, and the Baleares have all got really good deals for group 1 and 2 beneficiaries. So I say the main advice from somebody that handles inheritance is make a Spanish will. That's the main thing, just to give it a little bit of importance, discuss it with somebody, how that's all going to work. The other thing that surprises people when we go to probate in Spain is probate nowadays in Spain, if you've got a Spanish will, is actually much quicker than it is in the UK. So we often deal with solicitors over there, and while we take normally 3 to 4 months to get the whole estate wound up and the property ready to sell, for example, in the UK now it very easily goes to 7-8 months as a minimum. So that's just a quick sort of overview of how inheritance works in Spain. Enough. I don't know if there's anything in particular that you'd like to talk about, intestate process, or whether there's no Spanish will, how it works. You have to deal with the Spanish estate using the UK will, which is not a good idea. It can be done, much more expensive, and creates lots of problems. But this is something that I could talk about for 10 hours flat, because there's just a whole load of different situations. So if there's 2 or 3 sort of people asking the same sort of questions, well, we'll definitely reply to those.
Okay, Michael. Well, thank you very much. Please, Michael, share with us in the chat your email address, website, just in case people might have specific questions. But I know specific today is not the day for it. But they might organize a video consultation with you and take it from there. Now, I'm going to pass it on to Raphael, because he's going to tell us, not only about the wills and successions, inheritance issues, but it's more about protection, business and shareholders. Obviously, Pedro later on, he will tell us a bit more about executors and wills from our side, from Alicante region.
Mm.
And but I thought it was important because we never think about is the right time to do things, is it? So life insurance solutions that might help us to accommodate what we want. Okay, it's just basically to provide liquidity and financial protection. Because I just did listen from the expert a lot of opportunities to do things, and I think it's always worth it listening, talking about investments or planning on the wealth structures to cover inheritance taxes and successions. Here in Comunidad Valenciana, at the moment is okay because 100,000 euros is tax free. And then after that, you have 99% allowance from group one, which is children, great grandchildren, grandchildren, and parents. Okay, well, that's good in a way. It's important when you organize your will to talk about the tax issue. At the moment, I always say we can only talk about what is today because tomorrow, the government might change and they may increase the tax or they might even reduce it more. Okay. Now, practical strategies to help avoiding disputes as well. For example, joint ownership, Michael, as well. People having living everything to a joint property, and then the bottom line is to sell it. The faculties of executors to sell it and transfer the money. That's another good option to think about. Ensuring business continuity and protecting future generation. That's a lot of reflections that we thought it will be good to share it. So I'm going to pass you over to Rafael. He's having a presentation. I would like Rafael to keep it 15 minutes chat as well, bringing into the equation all things that in your expertise and on your career you've seen. And then we'll just pass on to Pedro and start with the questions and answers. Over to you, Rafael.
Okay, thank you, Ignacio. Good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, there's sure many things to do before you get to the moment in which you can do no more for your family and for your inheritors, and planning ahead is always a good advantage, and it's something that is going to solve a lot of hassle and problems for your beloved ones. Okay, so life insurance can make a lot for in this case for having liquidity, for paying all the taxes involved in this, and also for tax efficiency. Okay, there are many cases. I will go through some of them. This is something that you will always be better consulting with Ignacio and Pedro and tracing a strategy for your own case. So there's no universal recipe for everyone, okay? But there are many life insurance solutions that can make things easier for you and for your family. Once you are still working, there's the term life insurances for which you can have a life insurance for a certain period of time that can cope well with businesses. If you have business debts or buy-sell obligations on your business, it can cover with some liquidity for your heirs. Then there's always tax advantages when your heirs have they get the money from a life insurance. You have 9,195 euros allowance for each of the heirs, and it's ideal to breach until the state is fully structured. So sometimes everything that comes from a life insurance gets out of the state, so it's immediate liquidity to your heirs, so they can accomplish the whole inheritance process with some liquidity to afford all these taxes and everything involved with it. Then you can also use whole life life insurances with they have a permanent protection for you and for your heirs. You have certainty of capital on death regardless of age you have, so you can establish this to have this liquidity available for your heirs. And then it's quite important if you have investments, you can use the unit link, which is life insurance that backs all your investments or part of them. So you have also these advantages of having this money available for your heirs before the inheritance process. They will have liquidity immediately. They are paid directly to beneficiaries, bypassing probate, available within days. And in many autonomous communities, they have significant tax reductions also. So it's quite useful. With this, you can have your investments define. You can switch between funds. You can switch between risk profiles. You can manage your investments freely, but then have them all wrapped in a life insurance policy that gives you all these advantages, which are the direct paying to the beneficiaries. And also, it lets you choose beneficiaries independently from your will, right? So you can beneficiate some of your heirs, or you can help to structure your inheritance, because you might have a son that can get the real estate property, and another one that gets some cash out of these life insurance products. So you balance everything, and you have the one that wants to keep the real estate, that doesn't have to share the ownership with the other one that is always giving some complications, and usually makes a forced selling in unwanted moments and everything. So the biggest advantage is to choose who receives that money, to have it out of the whole state of the inheritance, and to be able to have liquidity very fast. In Spain, if everything goes normal, you have to liquidate the inheritance within 6 months, which sometimes seems long enough, but sometimes is not very long if there are disputes between the heirs. And so it's a good thing to have some liquidity that goes out of this state, and can make easier to liquidate the taxes, and to also to name beneficiaries as you want, because as it was said before by Michael, here in Spain, your children is going to be in the line of inheritance inevitably. So sometimes if you want to have your spouse having uh, most part of the inheritance money, it would be good to have some of it into an insurance policy that has her or he as a beneficiary.
Rafael, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
How old can you be for a life insurance in Spain so far, or through your
Yeah,
company?
it usually is up to 75 years old. I mean, you won't be kicked off the insurance if you do it before, but you cannot start when you are more than 75 years old. Okay,
Right.
usually.
So
Okay.
if you already hired a specific life insurance to cover eventualities or whatever, you think we could organize that before 75 and even cover if we get older, yeah?
Yeah, that's for the pure life insurance policies. When we are talking about life insurance investment policies, it usually lets you go up to 80 or even 85 years old, because these life insurance policies are not really giving you a lot of money for the death, but just covering your investments, and they give you a little plus in case of death, but they give you all the advantages of the life insurance taxation.
Mm,
Okay.
right. So, okay.
And then it's good to think about these things when wealth planning your life, during your life and after life. And you can, I mean, for these things, the ideal thing is contact Ignacio and Pedro, trace a strategy, and see what is your particular situation. Because in case you have running business already, or companies, there's also some strategies you can use with insurance policies to assure that if you have this business co-owned with other business partners that are not part of your family, you can ensure that there's a life insurance policy that helps your inheritance to sell this part of the company to the partners that are still on the company. Okay, so this is a part of it. We have life insurance policies that are specifically made for companies, running companies, and to ensure that the shareholding is not forced to share its shares with people that doesn't even want to be on the company. So they provide liquidity for the other shareholders to buy the shares of the heirs, and give them liquidity to into a pre-arranged quantity, you know. So, and this gets a lot of problems out of the table, right? Then through you, legal advisors, they can do family holding companies, what in Spain is called sociedad patrimonial, which is a useful instrument in many cases when there's a varied wealth between real estate assets, productive assets, and everything. So it can be all wrapped in this society, and be easy to transfer to your heirs during life and after life. Okay, then all these unit link and insurance wrappers for your investment, for your financial investments, they give you this ability to name beneficiaries and, let's say, skip the strict norms on the Spanish tax will law. Also, well, you have little differences or big ones. It depends on each Spanish community. But since inheritance tax is not so expensive, using these wrappers helps you also avoid double taxation between inheritance and and IRPF, yeah, taxing. Okay. Then, but there's always for avoiding disputes, for sales and tax exposure, there's always some key points, like having always a current and valid will, which is something in which you help a lot. Some have some liquidity plan for facing the inheritance tax. Maybe have a family protocol in case you have some running business already. Prevent some buyout mechanisms for these shares that you share with other partners that are not part of the family. And as always, have transparent family conversations before anything happens. That always eases things out. And beneficiary nomination reviews every now and then to see that everything is complaining with what you want. Right. And there are many different particular cases with life insurances that can be adapted to any particular case. It's something that we cannot give a universal recipe for everyone, but it's just the bullet points is that gives you ability to give liquidity to your heirs, ability to choose who receives what, and the tax efficiency you can achieve through these different products.
Okay, Rafael, well, thank you very much. It's quite interesting, specifically about the liquidity. Actually, we had a case about somebody who inherited a company, and that was a big issue about having the liquidity and selling the company. Obviously, it will be interesting to learn more about the like a project for those who've got shares with shareholders. How much will cost a life insurance? How long would it take? And what money will be in case? Obviously, if it goes to your beneficiaries, with Michael here in Andalusia, it will be great. With us, we have a different sliding scale. My understanding is the money will go to the beneficiaries and they will buy out on the protocol because the company should have these statutes saying that the holder of the policy will be the company paying for it. The beneficiaries are family and children. And then my understanding is they will sell the property for that amount of money. Isn't it that way, Rafael?
In case of companies, it usually is the company is the holder, the assured person is the shareholders, and the beneficiary are the rest of the shareholders. So it's the rest of the shareholders, the one
Oh,
that receive a money to buy the shares that the heirs receive. The heirs will be receiving them pretty much for
oh,
free.
I see. Right.
So it's the shareholders who agree in how much value does his shareholding part is
So
valued in.
Rafael, so it
Yeah.
means basically we need to do a project basically to work out inheritance tax because I'm sure Michael will agree that it will be more efficient the beneficiaries to be children or spouse, husband, wife, and children, and then probably have a life insurance rather than probably having a company because the inheritance tax for the shareholder is going to be very high. So if they're giving you X amount of money, pretty much 37% might end up going to the taxman here. Yeah. So it will be probably interesting to do like different cases and scenarios about what is more
Yes.
efficient over the
Yes.
liquidity. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Because if you're in the first line of relationship, you get the shares almost for free.
Mm,
If you value those shares in the inheritance tax at the value that you have agreed with your business partners, you're gonna sell them almost for the same price you put on that, so you won't have to pay tax income, and they will be covered not to have new shareholders that don't have relationship with the business and everything.
mm, mm. Quite interesting. Quite interesting. I don't
It's
know if
also
Michael wants. Yeah, go ahead.
just to add one thing, it's also interesting when you plan these things with your legal advisors like you make an estimation of what the inheritance process is gonna cost, and then you can build life insurance policy that covers all those costs. So you make an estimation of the liquidity needed, and you
Mm,
adapt this life policy or
mm.
this part of your investments that are wrapped on a life policy, so they give enough liquidity to go through the process pretty smooth.
But I'm sure, I don't know, Michael would agree that probably could be, I mean, the two scenarios are great, different things, but we're talking about children, grandchildren is always more efficient. So if I'm going to just do a life insurance for 500,000 euros, um, if I give it to the shareholder here, then probably he's not even receiving the 500,000. He's going to pay 37% and then the rest, you see. However, if you give it to the children will have the full amount pretty much tax free. I understand that probably the problem we might end up having is children selling the company to the other shareholder. That will be the issue. But the money, from an efficient point of view, tax efficient point of view, I think it will always be more efficient than life insurance to parents, well, obviously, husband, wife, or children from an inheritance tax point of view. I don't know if Michael wants to add something, but
Well, I like the idea of because the important thing is that always there's a trade-off between the inheritance tax, the inheritance valuation, and the capital gains tax. So in Spain, the sweet spot is if you're going to inherit something and you're a group one or two beneficiary, and therefore in most regions are going to pay almost no inheritance tax, you want to make sure that you receive that asset at market value so that when you sell it on, you don't pay capital gains tax. So for example, in this case with the shares, I'd leave the shares as in my will directly to my children. I'd make sure that when I value those shares, when I sign the inheritance deed, I declare its full value, and then I can sell them on at the same value and pay no capital gains tax. That's what I would aim to do in that case. The trade-off between inheritance tax and capital gains tax is something that people sometimes make terrible mistakes with, terrible mistakes. In our series, Inheritance from Hell, one of my favorite ones, well, not favorite ones, a horrible thing to say, but one of the examples that we give is somebody that inherited a plot of land because we've seen this case that happened. They inherit a plot of land. They're non-resident in Marbella. They tell their lawyer that it's worth 200,000 euros. It keeps their fees low because they think that that's all attached to it. They've declared 200,000 euro for this plot, and then 2 years later they've sold it for €1.5 million, and they've paid 24% on the profit when they could have just declared it right from the beginning at the €1.5 million. The first million inheritance would have been exempt, and the rest had a 99% discount. They would have paid €300 or €400 and paid no capital gains tax. So they've literally just given away like 300,000 euro. This is a very extreme case, but it's an extreme example of something that we see, a mistake that's made a lot. In fact, there's just one place in Spain where you can't really play this trade-off to your advantage, and that's in the Balearic Islands. The Balearic Islands, I don't know if you've ever come across it, it has a very special rule regarding applying the regional exemptions. For example, in Andalusia, if I have a property, I inherit for €1 million and I'm the son, I put €1 million on the title deed, even if the reference value is 400,000 or whatever, and I sell it for $1 million, I pay no capital gains tax. In the Balearics, if you on your inheritance deed value an asset at over 20% more than what the reference value is, and the reference value, the referencia, which are always extremely low, if you put more than 120% of its value, that's 20% more than the reference value, on your inheritance deed, they automatically consider that you've renounced the regional exemptions for inheritance tax, and you go to the national level. So in other words, if you've got a property that's worth €1 million, the reference value is worth 500,000, and you go to the client, you say, well, if you treat it like the rest of Spain, you'd go, well, the reference value, which is, we all know, is a very value that appears on the taxman's website, which is always very low, and the reference value is 600,000. So you say to your client, no, well, let's put $1 million, because then you're going to sell it for $1 million, and this will pay no inheritance tax and no capital gains tax when you sell. It's wrong. In the Balearics, if you're not over 120% of the reference value, you've automatically renounced to your regional exemptions, and you go on to the national level. On the national level, only the first 16,000 euro exempt, and then you pay on a sliding scale that goes from 7 to 34%. So you can imagine on a €1 million property, the tax is going to be tremendous. That difference between the Balearic system and the rest of Spain, we've seen errors committed with that. They're just basically people in tears over it. I mean, it is terrible. You have to be very careful. So the rest of Spain, the trade-off always has to be, if inheritance tax is really low to a group 1 or 2, give it a nice high value, not the benchmark value, as high as possible, so that we've got no capital gains tax when we sell. With the only thing, you have to be cautious that in the Baleares, since 2 years ago, that cannot be done because they've got this new rule there, which they'll probably catch up in the rest of Spain soon. But at the moment, it's a rule over there. But this trade-off thing of getting it wrong in the rest of Spain is something that we see a lot. People are just used to undervaluing their properties on the inheritance deed because they think they're sort of saving, and they're just not used to this new system where inheritance tax in general now is very low. So you don't want to just pay unnecessary capital gains tax when you sell in the future.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michael, it's a very interesting topic here. I was not aware that it was that terrible. And actually, that's why it's so important to do planning and having different scenarios. But Michael, as I said, today it is what it is, but probably tomorrow, who knows what is going to happen. So when you do planning, we can only budget what it is now, isn't it?
People need to realize that in Spain, inheritance tax, inheritance declaration, everything is self-assessment. So you can get things very wrong. It is possible to get things wrong, and it's no good like this client that came into us with his plot. Say, oh, I want to now he's going to sell the property. Now I want to change the value. Impossible. It's just money that he then asked us to sue the other lawyer for against his insurance. But I spoke to the other lawyer, and the lawyer told me that the client had lied to him about the value because he'd agreed on a percentage basis fee on the probate, which was so basically to save pennies. It's cost him as horrendous. And in the end, it was true because the other lawyer actually sent me the email because the client had filled in the form with the values and all sorts of things. So anyway, it's
Okay, I'm gonna thank you, Michael. I'm gonna pass over to Pedro. He's gonna tell us a bit about his experience with inheritance, well, obviously estate planning, inheritance tax, and executors, and a bit more about it. And we'll just jump, Michael, Rafa, Pedro, will just jump into questions and answer. Rafael, please send them your email address in case somebody wants to talk about, probably talking to you about doing projects or covering eventualities and liquidity. Over to you, Pedro. I think the microphone is off, but yeah,
Okay,
over to you.
okay, Ignacio. Okay, well, Michael and Rafa, I think it has been said most of issues about wills and inheritance. Obviously, in Comunidad Valenciana, right now we have like I would say a good treatment on taxes. We have experienced that many clients, I mean, probably in the past, because of magazines, news, some rumors about the inheritance tax, it was big or too big. I mean, but now between the first and second group the reduction is quite big. It's 99% of the quotee. So imagine that you have some assets and then you have to pay X amount of taxes. Then that amount of taxes that you need to pay is reduced 99%. So normally it's reduced as Michael says, some hundreds of euros. So in Comunidad Valenciana it's like that. In Murcia, for example, it's similar, but in Comunidad Valenciana, in Barcelona, Valencia, sorry about the dog, right now some barking someone. And in Murcia region, for example, they do not have another reduction that we have in Comunidad Valenciana. It's between brothers and nephews and uncles, and this second grade, what we say, of second grade of blood, which the reduction started this yesterday, 25% reduction, and then next year in June 2027, 1st of June 2027, will be increased to 50% reduction on that as well, which is pretty good. So with that, there are many issues that clients come to the office and says, okay, I want to make some gift to my children. I want to put the property into my children's name. And my question is why? Because normally they say, because I want to avoid inheritance. I want to avoid for them inheritance tax. But there's no an argument to defend that. In many cases, or put the properties into the companies, and the companies obviously is going to be inherit. Companies that are worth, or the holders are, they own more than 25% of the companies. There's no activity, there's just properties. So there are many issues that obviously in the inheritance tax, right now the reduction is quite big in order to plan, and at the end to one of the things that I don't know if it's been said about wills. Obviously, a will is a must. I would say it's extremely important. It's not obligation really, because I mean you have a will somewhere in the world, always will be able to be valid. But obviously here, whenever you have assets in Spain, as been said by Michael, it's highly recommended to make a will. And one of the things we also include, and with our clients, we are always normally we are engaged, or we are chosen, we are selected to be, we call it in Spanish albacea contador partidor, which is like an executor of a will. In Spain, we have two different cases. It's very similar. It's like one which is going to be the maintains, get the possession, control, protect the assets, and have the obligation to that whatever it says in the will is going to happen. And the other one is to value the assets, a property, a car, a bank account, funds, whatever, a life insurance, whatever it is, value it, and maybe some obligations like a mortgage or some other debts, whatever, and make this happen on value, on financially, who is going to receive this and that. And these two figures, albacea and contador partidor, which has some similarities in Spanish law, it will happen. And I think this is also extremely important. Normally, when both spouses have died, or whenever the beneficiaries are outside Spain, that's extremely important to have it. And regarding Ignacio about inheritance tax, which is the main issue today, obviously is extremely important. It's been said about the values. Whenever you make values as a contador partidor, you make values on the property, you make values on. You need to check about what is going to be the pay. What are you going to pay on this? Because maybe you are going to save a lot of money at the beginning, and but also you're going to pay more in the future on capital gains tax. Or right now, as the situation is on inheritance tax, is always favorable, or most of the cases, favorable to put properties or things that you may want to sell in the future as a market value, and then not to pay too much capital gain and taxes. And I think there are some questions regarding this. Let's go ahead with this. Let's start with one of the first ones. Is does the grandchild, as a beneficiary, has to pay tax on the increased value of the primary residency? Well, at the end, as we said, I mean, the child or grandchild, in this case, is group. We call it group 1, group 2 is it covers in Valencia region at least, and also in Murcia in this case. And I think it's been.
She's in Mallorca. There's 100% exemption, but as long as they overvalue the property by more than 20%, more than the reference value. So if they go above that amount, then they will be subject to the taxes at the national level and only have their first 16,000 euro exempt. So yeah, she's in Mallorca. So the grandchildren, I say, as long as they keep the values below the benchmark value, or sorry, not more than, they don't increase it by more than 20%, then they can claim the 100% exemption.
Okay, Michael, we have one question from Andrew. I will read it to him. It says, what is the procedure after death of one of my parents when they have a will in England and a will in Spain, which follows English law?
Okay, well, basically, the fact that it follows English law still keeps it all separate. It's not referring to the English law, it just says that it's following the English law. So basically, what they would normally do is they'd contact their lawyer in the UK. He'll start probate over there. They'd contact us in Spain, and we handle probate here. And then basically, the only time that the two wills are going to cross are going to be, one, if the person that passed away was domiciled in the UK, once they go through the probate procedure in Spain with their UK solicitor, there comes a time where if the deceased was deemed domiciled in the UK, the English solicitor will ask them whether there are any assets abroad, and they have to put on a form whether there are assets or they're not assets. If there are assets abroad, the next thing their solicitor in the UK is going to do is ask for a contact of their lawyer in Spain, and they will write to me, and I will prepare a certification of what the value of the Spanish assets are and what taxes we've been paid. I send that certificate to the lawyer in the UK. He will add those assets to the estate in the UK and then tax if it's beyond the threshold. The other time where it would cross, the paths would cross, is if on my side now, if I'm handling the estate in Spain and I've wound up the Spanish assets using the Spanish will, once I've finalized if any of my beneficiaries are residents in Spain, I have to tell them that when I present their inheritance tax return, because in Spain we present the inheritance tax return for each beneficiary, not for the deceased. Once I'm presenting the inheritance tax return, I have to ask them, have any of you inherited any assets outside Spain? If they have, I've got to, when I do their inheritance tax return, I've got to declare for them both the assets that they've received in Spain plus the assets that they've received from abroad. And if they've paid an inheritance tax abroad, I can claim a unilateral relief in respect to the inheritance tax paid on those assets abroad. So in other words, if there's a will in each country, from a civil point of view, the distribution will happen in each country, but there is certain crossover when it comes to declaring inheritance tax, which depends on those two things that we just mentioned.
Okay.
I don't know if the viewers are able to follow that through, because it's.
I hope Andrea.
It's all a bit overwhelming. I do it every day, so I get carried away.
When Victor asks, how about assets that are located in Spain, but like foreign investments here and outside Spain? This is one of the questions, Michael, that regarding if someone is inheriting some funds, for
Sorry,
example,
what's the timestamp on that?
is 1751.
Sorry, what sort of
VL 1751
sorry, what
by
time?
Victor 1751.
Oh, sorry, one second. What
And
is
it says,
after death of
how
one of
about
the parents when they have a will in England? And they went, oh,
the following one?
Oh, sorry. No, we've already done that one. Oh, this one.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The following
How
one.
about assets? They're not located in Spain. Okay, this is a good one. Okay, so
this is a really good one, because I mean, obviously we have a lot of clients that the beneficiaries are located residents outside Spain, and sometimes the funds are in those countries, and sometimes the beneficiaries in Spain and the funds are outside Spain, and sometimes the beneficiaries are in Spain and the funds are in Spain. So there is a difference on this.
yeah. Okay, so there's various sort of situations. So if we have the situation like I like to have it, which doesn't always necessarily be, but I like to have one will in each country wherever possible. Okay, sometimes we do wills in Spain for worldwide assets, but we always say that they have a chance to have one will in each country. So if that's the case, what we would do in this case is this. So if I have a will in Spain for Spanish assets and I've got beneficiaries that are abroad, there is no problem whatsoever. In other words, we'd simply send over powers of attorney, they'd send them over, we wind it all up. And if they are non-resident to Spain, when I comes to declare, do the inheritance tax return, because everyone's got to do an inheritance tax return, even though not everyone's got to pay inheritance tax. So if they're non-residents, I'll just declare the assets in Spain. If they're residents in Spain, I declare the assets worldwide. Like you said before, in these cases where the beneficiaries are non-resident to Spain, for us to already have been named executors on the will does have certain advantages, and it can be much quicker because I don't have to wait for the powers of attorney to do a lot of the work. Then regarding if I'm dealing with my Spanish will and I'm dealing with the Spanish assets, at the end, hopefully those assets abroad will have been dealt with by another will over there. Once I finalize the civil distribution by the inheritance deed, when it comes to doing the inheritance tax returns, if my beneficiary is a resident, as we said before, I've also got to declare the assets abroad on the inheritance tax return. There's something else that some people don't realize, and that in Spain, so the beneficiary, if he's a non-resident, he only declares assets in Spain. If he's a resident, he declares assets worldwide. But with the definition of assets that are in Spain, there's just one exception. There is one type of asset that is physically outside Spain, but is considered for inheritance tax purpose to be in Spain, and that's Spanish compliant bonds. Spanish compliant bonds is an insurance product, which probably Rafael knows about it, even though as he's in Spain, maybe not sell this product, but it's a product that's sold mainly by the company SEB, and Living Frank sell it. They're products that are sold mainly in Ireland and I think and Malta, I think it was. And they've got their own sort of. There was, for some reason, there was some kind of agreement made years ago with the Spanish taxman and the people that sold this product, the Spanish compliant bond. And the reason they're considered to be in Spain, that there's certain conditions, in other words, that the insured life has to be in Spain, resident in Spain, there are certain conditions, and it's considered to be in Spain. They've always sold this as some great advantage because it makes things easier. The reality is it doesn't give me any advantage whatsoever in winding up the estate. Just the only thing is that the only thing that happens is that when people have to declare their assets outside Spain on the famous 720 form, they didn't have to declare these life policies because they were already being declared by those companies to the Spanish tax office directly. But in reality, it's really, I've always felt that it's sort of an oversell that's been happening with these products because there's no real advantage. It's like having to declare these assets on a 720 form is no big deal. It's just like any other asset abroad. And for the purpose of winding up the estate later, for us as inheritance lawyers, it doesn't really, for me to have to contact the insurance company over there for one being in Spain. Well, to be honest, I prefer to contact one that's in Spain. That's sort of the long and short. There's not that. There was a time when these products were sold a lot. You don't see it that often, but every now and again we still come across one of these policies. They're very strategic. If you look at the tax code where it says, non-residents only declare assets in Spain. And there's a little thing that says, except for, and it explains this Spanish compliant bond situation. It's a bit of an anomaly, really.
I think you've got a point, Michael, here about some financial advisors in the area insisting about getting the Spanish compliant bond versus something different. And to be honest, on how much tax you pay on your wealth and how good is the investment, whether you need to declare on the 720 or not, that's really
it's irrelevant,
not really,
because if you have to
it's
declare it,
irrelevant.
it's like, it just doesn't make any. I mean, there's no extra effort in reality of declaring
I agree.
on the 720 form.
To be honest, I prefer to have I do the 720 rather than only buying something
But at the
because
end
it's
of
a
the
Spanish
day,
compliant
there was
bond.
at the end of the day, there's no look from the actual year by year tax. There's no advantage, because like any investment fund in Spain, or if you have shares, you don't pay capital gains tax until you sell the product. So while that product is in that investment until it's sold, it's logical that you don't pay any tax. It's not taxable. But there's no if you have shares or participations here, you don't pay tax on it until you sell. And with inheritance tax, there's no advantage, because if you have a couple a married couple, one of them has a Spanish compliant bond with their life insured in favor of their spouse. When it comes to actually get them to release the money, they still insist on us presenting proof that we've got inheritance tax clearance anyway, exactly the same as if the product was over here. So I don't find any real advantage in any way. So it's just
Another important thing, Michael, another important thing for people to reflect and think about when they do their distribution will be who's the beneficiary, where is it tax liable? Because if I'm leaving one of my children that they live in the UK, they're resident in the UK, I am resident in Spain, but the money is in the UK and the beneficiary is in the UK, they don't need to do anything in Spain. So that's important as well, because the answer
no. They don't. No, they have to declare it, because for all practical purpose, a Spanish compliant bond is understood to exist in Spain.
no,
So
I
even if
understand, but inheritance tax.
even if the beneficiary is a non-resident, because of the deals that these companies have got with Spain, they will not release the money until the correct tax returns have been presented. So if, for example, the beneficiary of a Spanish compliant bond that's insuring a life in Spain is their neighbor in the UK, their friend in the UK, when I go to one of these companies and say, please release the money to the beneficiary of the life policy, they'll say, yes,
Yeah.
but remember, for all practical purpose, this money is in Spain, and therefore we've got an agreement with the Spanish government that we do not release the money, otherwise they'd be responsible, until we see the tax clearance documents. So I've got to show them the 650 form showing that the full tax has been paid as a beneficiary that's not group 1 or 2 receiving, and until I clear it, they won't release. So it doesn't really have, I say, it doesn't really have any advantage. That's my
Okay.
my opinion.
Okay, Pedro, any other questions that we need to answer through here? I know we're getting a lot of them. I mean, for inheritance tax purposes, everybody needs to understand, depending on the area where they're located, the assets.
Someone's asking there about Murphy. I think I left Murphy out. I think Pedro, we both left Murphy.
Well, Murcia is very similar. It's very similar from
Yeah.
Valencia region, except they don't have these reductions for a third group, which is brothers, nieces, and uncles, aunts. They don't have this issue or this reduction. They have a big reduction on first and second grade between children and grandchildren, spouses, of 99%, but that's all.
It's like Madrid, isn't it, Pedro? It's like Madrid. Is 99%, but no extra reduction. Yeah.
Exactly. So there are some other questions, some interesting ones. Let me just check. Okay, let's go ahead.
Here's one about dissolving a joint ownership, which is 623. Would you like me to answer that one?
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's somebody here asking, well, this would be a typical sort of estate planning exercise that some people do. Look, we've got this jointly owned property. We want to put it into one name. How do we do it? Okay, so they say they presume it's exempt. Don't presume it's exempt. It's not exempt. Okay, so if you dissolve a joint ownership, there is one advantage, and that is, okay, well, we have to see, because it depends. If, for example, the property is owned jointly by two spouses, marriage separation of assets, one could donate to the other, and there's hardly any donation tax in most places. But what people must always realize is that there's the plusvalia tax, the town hall, that's very small, we won't talk about. But when you dissolve a joint ownership, on the person that acquires the property, there's going to be either donation tax document tax, or transfer tax. One of these three. So we forget transfer tax because that would be the most expensive, whichever region you're in on half the property. The donation on the acquired price would be the best deal in the regions where there's no donation tax. For example, very low donation tax, like Andalusia, where it's 99% discount. And on the rest of the cases, we do document tax, which here in Andalusia is 1.2, and up there it'd be 1.5. But what people forget with these donations, there's dissolving a joint ownership, and this is again in one of our videos of inheritance planning from hell, is they forget that there could be underlying capital gains tax. In other words, if you've got a property with a value of 300,000 euro owned by two people, but it was originally purchased for 100,000. If you dissolve the joint ownership now, you can't go lower than the reference value. So let's say the reference value is not 300, instead let's say it's 200. But remember, you originally purchased it for 100. If it's not your main home and there's no exemption because you're disposing of your main home over 65, etc., you're going to have the person that's disposing of the asset. Everyone's very happy because they go into the solicitor. They dissolve the joint ownership, pay just 1.2% document tax. They get their new title deed. They're all very happy. And then 3 or 4 months later, they receive a bill from the tax office saying, hey, you originally purchased property for 100, so half 50. Now you're disposing it for 200, half 100. Therefore, you've made 50,000 euro in a capital gains tax, and they send you a bill between 19 and 24% on the profit. So that's something else that we've seen happen, a big mistake that we sometimes see happen. And solicitors actually giving, when they're asked to, we want to dissolve the joint ownership, so they give them the notary fee, registrar fee, solicitor's fee, and then either document tax or donation tax, depending which is the one that's most beneficial. But they forget to tell them about the underlying capital gains tax that there could be. I mean, if at the end of the day you've got a property that you only purchased 3 years ago and you're going to donate it for the same price that you originally purchased it for, then there's no problem. But in all other cases, we have this problem with all donations. In other words, lots of clients, they come in and they say, well, we see inheritance tax is really, really low now, but we've got loads of assets. They're worth, 5 million euro now. And we think that we're going to hedge our bet, so we want to donate at least a couple of assets over to the kids now so that we can make use of this really low donation tax, because donation tax was lowered when inheritance tax was lowered. Do it now in case inheritance tax goes up in the future. And that's a great thing, but they've got to make sure they choose the properties that don't have a large underlying capital gains tax, because otherwise it's going to be an expensive exercise. So at the moment in Andalusia, when you inherit, you get a free step up, but when you donate, you've got to pay the capital gains tax. Does that make sense or not? I'm not saying for the viewers, obviously. I know you know exactly how it all works.
I think, it is quite important, all this. We're running out of time. Actually, we need to go because we have another meeting now. Michael, I thank you very much for your expertise. I don't know if you
invited me.
If you share it with us, your email, so people could just watch your videos or learn more about, depending on situations. Obviously, there is not an general answer. This is only general advice, but it's worth it doing a specific study on possible scenarios for your peace of mind. I think this money well spent. I think it's peace of mind, finding solutions to problem or possible problems, joint ownership, share selling in the future, liquidity, taxation. Even though we don't have the crystal ball here, because we don't know what will be the applicable law, Michael, eventually, whether it will be Andalusia, a better place, or Valencia, or Mallorca, or Madrid, who knows, you see?
Yeah, and just sorry, nothing. One last thing before I forget, because somebody on one of our previous webinars, somebody reminded me, an English accountant that must be watching our webinar, and he called me after, and he's absolutely right. And not that I didn't know, I just forgot to mention it. We're not English lawyers, we're Spanish lawyers, but people do need to realize that in the UK, if the deceased is deemed domicile in the UK, you can be taxed on your worldwide assets. Okay, I sort of did touch on it slightly before, just to make things clear that that you can have no tax to pay at all in Spain on your Spanish asset, yet still have to pay tax on that asset back in the UK. So you do sort of need advice from an English lawyer as well. The perfect situation would be to get on a Zoom with somebody like us, together with your lawyer in the UK. and then discuss it together, because then we can get the full picture and really help, give the maximum help. I think that's.
I think you've got a very good point here, and obviously we're running out of time, Michael. But the thing is, now I think the law is being changed in the UK about inheritance taxes. So you
Yes.
open a can of worms now. You open a can of worms because that's quite important, because you probably is very efficient from Spain, but might not be very efficient in the UK, because you might end up paying, I believe, up to 40%, correct?
40% above the threshold in the UK. Yeah, yeah.
So I think it's worth it to have discussion, doing proper planning and putting your mind to rest. We're going to share with you here emails from all of us. Obviously, we're running out of time. We don't have much, but we could go on and on and on, Michael, with different cases, different scenarios. Pedro, thank you very much. I think you and me, we have a
Thank
meeting.
you.
We're running
Exactly.
out
We
of
have it
time.
right now.
Yeah,
That's
Rafael,
right.
Michael, see you very soon. Thank you
Great
for
to
the
see you.
audience.
Thanks for inviting me.
And I pass
Bye.
it on to
Bye.
Juan Fran.
Thank
Over
you.
to you,
Thank
Juan
you.
Fran. Thank you.
When a loved one passes, it takes time to assimilate losing them. At these times, when you least want to deal with paperwork, Pellicer and Heredia are here to help. One of our lawyers will be in touch to inform you about the process and answer all your doubts on the legalities. No matter where the assets and heirs of the deceased are located, and without having to travel to Spain, we can advise you in carrying out all the required proceedings in Spain. Obtain the death certificate. Search for assets, debts, and existing insurance policies. Give advice on accepting or renouncing the inheritance in Spain. Hand over information on all the related costs. Pay all the compulsory taxes on your behalf, and translate all the legal documents required. And remember that upon death, when carrying out all these processes, legal deadlines apply. Through this difficult time, when you most need help, Pellicer and Heredia is with you every step of the way. Pellicer and Heredia, international lawyers.